welcome to the Cabinet meeting of East Renfrewshire Council. We're all here and ready to go. So first item on the agenda, any apologies for absence. I can see everyone is here, so I think we can carry on. Second point on the agenda, any declarations of interest? Any of these papers? Nope. Nope, so we move on. So item number 3, Joint Consultative Committee, which is minutes of that meeting that we had on the 16th of June. This is really for the record in terms of our discussions with them. I don't know if, Sharon, if you've got anything you want to add to the minutes that have been declared, or...
No, I've got nothing to add, Councillor O'Donnell.
Any questions on those minutes? We'll accept those. Obviously, it's a very difficult time in pay negotiations in terms of funding for the councils, and we will continue to be talking with all of the union representatives through this process in order to get a good settlement on pay, but that process is still ongoing. So the next item on the agenda is financial performance for the year end, March 2022. If I could ask Margaret McCrossan to talk to that paper and any sort of things you want to draw to our attention. Thank you.
Yes, this report gives us an outline of the unaudited financial results for 21-22, and it compares the outturn position with the final budgetary control statement that was made back to the Cabinet in April this year, and it confirms the financial results that we emailed out to all elected members back in June of this year. So once again, the report does demonstrate that we continue to perform well throughout the Council. Financially, our financial affairs have been well managed, and all the general fund departments have maintained outturn spend within budget, with the one small exception of the non-support service element of the Chief Exec's office, where we had a deficit because of a sharp fall in investment returns because of the prevailing economic conditions, which obviously are out with the Council's control. The Council, at the end of the year, achieved an improved position to the position that we had budgeted for, and that was because directors had been taking action to avoid non-essential spend, particularly towards the latter part of 21-22, so that we could help address future financial pressures, as we knew that budget challenges for 2022 and 23 and beyond were becoming starker. Along with some income generation and additional Scottish Government grants, we produced an improved position of 3.857 million. So that was the improvement over budget. So in simple terms, instead of having to draw down £3.75 million as we'd budgeted to do to balance our budget, we were actually at the end of the year able to contribute 107,000 to our general unallocated reserve instead of drawing money out of it. As a result of this, our non-earmarked or unallocated general fund reserve had a balance of 11.777 million unaudited as at the 31st of March 2022, and that represents 4.4% of our net revenue expenditure. That's just slightly higher than the Council's usual policy aim of a 4% reserve. But as the Council has already committed 5.253 million of that reserve in balancing the 22-23 budget, the position now that we would expect at 31st of March 2023 is only going to be a balance of 6.524 million, or around 2.4% in our general reserve in the current year. The last report that went up to Cabinet was just at the beginning of April, and that was projecting at that point an underspend of 1.8 million. So there was an improvement of £2 million by the year end. And as I say, that reflects the additional efforts that directors had made since late in the calendar year, to avoid all non-essential spend. And the main areas where we contributed to this additional underspend were staff vacancies, where we did what we could not to fill vacancies. There was an underspend on supplies and services, as you'd expect, avoiding all non-essential spend. There was a little bit of improved income generation, and we had a few additional elements of Scottish Government grants coming in. The outturn position for 21-22 being better than we expected will obviously help us in addressing the significant financial challenges and uncertainties that we know we're facing in the coming years. And I've been talking about the general fund departments, so those departments are funded by council tax. But for the housing revenue account, it's unaudited year-end position, a deficit of 354,000. However, that means that the accumulated HRA surplus balance, which has been built up over a number of years, is still at a reasonably healthy 1.867 million. So we're asking the Cabinet today to note the satisfactory outturn position for the old year, and note that once the audit has been completed, final accounts will be submitted to a future meeting of the Council together with the Auditor's report. And at the moment, we're expecting that that meeting would take place towards the end of October.
Thank you very much, Margaret. Could I open this up to questions from the members?
Margaret, you mentioned the general fund, the reserves, you've got put away. Just for the record, with the new Cabinet members, what other funds have we got in reserve?
We actually have a number of reserve funds, but the rest of them are all earmarked for specific purposes. At the moment, we've got earmarked reserves, including a COVID reserve, which holds government COVID grants, which we must spend on COVID-related items, and not on anything else. So we've got that as a reserve. We have a modernisation fund reserve, which is how we fund our change and transformation programmes. We have got a capital reserve, which we built up over many years to a substantial amount and then used it to help invest in new facilities, in particular Maidenhill Primary School, and to contribute towards the costs of our new early learning and childcare facilities. So that reserve's quite low now, it's down only about £2.5 million. We've got a repairs and renewals fund. We have a small insurance fund and a PFIPPP equalisation fund, because government grant will run out before we've finally finished making all our payments on PFIPPP. So that's just a snapshot of some of the main reserves that we hold. But as I say, they're all earmarked for various uses.
And thanks for that question, Councillor Devlin. Also in the draft accounts, all of those reserves are identified, all the earmarked reserves. Margaret didn't mention the total amount, but it's pretty significant amounts. Other questions? I'd just like to note the better cost management than expected when the budget was set. That was very, very helpful in terms of our financial position. Can I ask you to think about what mechanisms we can put in place to have a better outturn assumptions when determining the budget? Because obviously a better performance of 2 million or so is pretty significant in some of the choices that we are making. Or mechanisms that we're maybe able to adjust retrospectively the budget based on prior year performance. If that makes sense. So if I could ask you to consider that.
Yes, Yeah, we believe that the forecast of about 1.8 million at period 10 would only have been slightly improved had it not been for the actions of the directors in the last 4 months of the year to really tighten our belts.
Thanks.
But yes, we can take that on board, and we do review the underspends at the end of every year and try to factor that into our planning going forward, and we will do that again.
Thanks for that. Can we take the recommendations in the paper as agreed? Agreed. Thank you very much. So moving on to the next item on the agenda, which is Margaret again, and it's the outturn forecast on the performance for 22-23. Thank you, Margaret.
Sorry. Do you want me to start again, or are you all right? Could you hear that much? As I say, we are required to report not on the basis of the actual loan repayments that the council makes, but for service monitoring, we have to report on the basis of the value of assets that the councils use. So rather than loan repayments, which are actually cash payments, for monitoring services, we have to take out the loan repayments and substitute those with capital charges, which, if you like, are a depreciation charge which recognises the level of use that each service is making of council assets, particularly buildings and vehicles and equipment. So there's a great big adjustment happens, and we've explained in paragraphs 1 and 2 that we have to take out the loan charges and substitute the capital charges. For the rest of the year, we will be monitoring on the basis only of the capital charges built in and not the loan charges. So it's just to let you see the loan charges coming out, the capital charges coming in, and the next reports will be slightly less complex in this for the rest of the year. So, taking us back to the position at 30th of June, when we look at actual spend to date against budget, we're actually 3.1 million less than budget in terms of what we spent, but that is a temporary phenomenon. It's largely due to variances in the timing of expenditure and income, and it's not expected to continue throughout the year. On the basis of the latest information, we're actually predicting a year-end overspend of 1.498 million, or just over 0.5% of our annual budget. And that is adjusted. If we take out the HRA element of that, the underlying position on general fund service budgets is a forecast underspend of 1.389 million. And that's at the end of the year. The reasons for these departmental variances are all set out in the report, but the major variances relate, as you won't be surprised to hear, to the unusually high inflationary pressures that we're currently facing. They are particularly impacting on utilities, transport, transport prices, and they're also impacting on contracts, because for many of the council contracts, such as PFI schemes or some of our IT contracts, the annual payments that we have to make in line with these contracts are actually linked to inflation, CPI or RPI, which, as you know, are running very, very high just now, and certainly much higher than we anticipated when we set the budget back in February, March time. So the position outlined above relates just to our normal operational serve budgets. But on top of that, we also expect to have to meet just over £4 million of ongoing COVID pressures during the course of this current year. But we don't need to worry too much about those, because we already have earmarked COVID government grant, as we explained in the reserves, and those resources at the moment are enough to cover all of our anticipated 4.1 million COVID pressures that we've already identified we'll have to meet in the face of the coming year. I would stress that this is only the first forecast of the year, and it's likely to be subject to significant change. For example, if pandemic pressures are significantly greater than expected, or indeed if the current year's pay award that's already been mentioned is settled at a significantly higher rate than has been allowed for in the budget. So given the tight nature of the Council's finances and the current economic climate, we will continue to actively monitor the position and provide regular Cabinet reports on the financial performance and outturn forecasts throughout the year. We're asking you now to approve the budget adjustments that have been shown, note the current financial position, and in order to bring our forecast spend back into line with the budget, to require directors to avoid all non-essential expenditure and do all they can to monitor and control budgets, as we asked them to do late on in last year. We're asking them to do it from a much earlier point this year.
Thank you very much, Margaret. Any questions from members? Margaret, I've got a couple of comments. You just bear with me. So I think, first of all, I note that you made a number of adjustments to these paper to give greater clarity on the year-end adjustments. These are quite technical and but pretty significant, so thank you for adding that greater clarity for members. We've also discussed in future papers that we have greater analysis on the year-to-date position, in particular where there are timing differences, and to highlight permanent underlying differences. So, for example, utilities, which we are already seeing real increases in spend, and I'm sure inflationary pressures will be part of that as well. Purpose of that really is to give greater clarity to members as to what we're actually seeing year to date in terms of impacts on budget versus an estimate of a forecast going forward, to give us better insight into how the council's finances are performing through the year. So we've already discussed and agreed that we'd have a look at that for future papers. So thank you very much for that. So if there are no other comments, we'll take the recommendations as agreed. Particularly note the point on discretionary expenditure. No one likes to do this or to recommend that. We want to be investing in our services for our residents, but given the current climate and given the forecast pressures of inflation, I think it's the sensible thing to do in this environment. So thank you very much, Margaret. Can we take all those recommendations as agreed? Agreed. Thank you very much. So moving on to general funds, not there, housing capital's not there. So I think the next item on the agenda is item 8, which is the Flexible Local Authority COVID Economic Recovery Fund, or LACER as we're calling it internally. Louise, would you like to talk to that paper, please?
I will. Thanks, Leader. As Cabinet will be aware, throughout the pandemic there have been various short-term funds aimed at supporting response and recovery. This paper follows a report we brought to Cabinet in April this year and sets out proposals for East Renfrewshire's share of an £18 million fund agreed by COSLA leaders in the Scottish Government, as you said, called LACER, Local Authority COVID Economic Recovery Fund. East Renfrewshire's share of that fund has now been confirmed at £1.469 million, and that has to be used within the current financial year 22-23. In late February, COSLA leaders agreed a set of guiding principles for use of that fund, and these included supporting local economic recovery, helping businesses move from a period of survival to recovery and growth, rebuilding consumer confidence and stimulating demand and economic activity, and also to support low-income households to become more economically active. We used research on the impact of the pandemic locally and developed a three-tier approach to use of the fund in East Renfrewshire, and Cabinet approved that in April. So that was about support to businesses linked to low-income households, so maybe in sectors with lower paid staff, support to businesses who've been most adversely affected by the pandemic, both to stimulate recovery and help build their resilience. So that might be the Shop Local campaign, which was specifically mentioned in the guidance we received. And support to low-income households who've been most adversely affected. So that can be direct support like shopping vouchers or indirect support such as money advice and rights and fuel poverty support and advice. So a range of proposals have now been developed by Economic Development, working in partnership with the Child Poverty Group and Local Employability Partnership, and we've scrutinised these against the criteria we set. You have before you a slightly revised set of proposals which has been updated following member engagement in recent days. And the finalised paper is now available on the website as well. So our proposals here today include support to our local social housing tenants, some winter clothing support for vulnerable children on clothing grants, funding that will allow professionals in our schools, money advice and rights and citizens advice to make small discretionary hardship payments to people in immediate need and to support fuel poverty. It tops up the Scottish Welfare Fund, it supports a couple of the food share schemes in priority areas, and common with a number of other local authorities, it includes distribution of Scotland Loves Local gift cards to those in receipt of council tax reduction in the local area. It also includes support for local businesses, including a drive to increase uptake of real living wage, give advice on COVID regulations and recovery, skills development, green business initiatives, support towards the opening of the Green Law Works Business Centre, which was delayed due to the pandemic, and establishment of a Black and Minority Ethnic Business Forum. The use of these LACER funds is subject to Scottish Government monitoring, and that will include case study evidence, and a further update on the progress and outcomes of this funding will be brought to Cabinet next year as part of end-year reporting. There are always concerns about the lack of a long-term commitment to some of the areas in the face of challenging budget settlements here. We are, however, developing further proposals for additional COVID recovery funding, including the earmarked reserves that Margaret mentioned. And those proposals will be presented separately to Cabinet in the autumn, and they may include the ability to extend some of these LACER proposals out further a little bit, and we will also look to support households who've been the worst affected by the pandemic, including those in financial hardship. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Louise. Can I open to members for any questions?
Yeah, just a question. Page 52, paragraph 10. Basically, it says there has been broad engagement with a range of internal and external shareholders to build on the research and consultation on the impact of COVID in East Renfrewshire and to develop a series of proposals for consideration. These proposals listed, blah, 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 provide a mix of outcomes across three criteria specified. Elected members weren't involved in the obviously the engagement of it, were they?
Elected members were involved in as much as we set the criteria with Cabinet in April, and also we had shared with elected members and as part of the community planning partnership discussions the outcomes of the humanitarian research that we'd done on the impact of the pandemic locally and also child poverty, and the outcomes under what we call the 4 harms of the pandemic. So elected members were involved in those specific areas, and we have had more recent dialogue on the specific proposals in here. There's further work we can do as part of the proposals that we're developing for the autumn, and we will engage further with members in the development of those proposals before we bring any papers.
It's an economic development paper. I mean, was the relevant convener involved in this?
I think there were timing issues with the development of this paper because of the election cycles and because of recess as well, and the need to bring up proposals very quickly in terms of the spend that has to be done within 22-23, and that has hampered our ability to engage as we would normally have engaged. But we were working very much around scrutinising based on the proposals and the criteria that we set in April, and officers were delegated to do that.
And any other questions from members? Just to summarise, I think we all welcome this additional investment. It's much needed for the residents of East Renfrewshire, and I'm sure it'll be welcomed by them as well. Look forward to see the monitoring on the outturns and the successes of these programmes, because that will obviously input into any further programmes we do going forward to learn, what worked well, what didn't work so well. And it's obviously important that there's so many people struggling out there at the moment that we engage with as many stakeholders as possible and members when constructing these programmes. I really look forward to the update to Cabinet later in the autumn on further initiatives that we can do. This is important for our residents, and it's important that we help them as much as we can in COVID recovery and to help tackle the cost of living crisis. So thank you very much for the team. A lot of work has gone into this. This will be very welcome to our residents. Thank you very much. So can we take the recommendations from the paper as agreed?
Yes, agreed.
So thank you very much. So moving on to the next paper, which is item number 9, UK Shared Prosperity Fund. And I'll let Michael McKernan talk to that. Thank you.
Morning. Michael McKernan, Economic Development Manager within Environment Department, here to discuss the UK Shared Prosperity Fund, covering the years 2022 to 2025. So post Brexit, the European government, the UK government are actually replacing European structural funds with the new programme UK Shared Prosperity Fund. East Renfrewshire Council has received significant amounts of money over the years from European structural funds, both in terms of European Social Fund, which primarily funds employability activity, and the European Regional Development Fund, which traditionally supports capital investment as well as business support as well. So in terms of the current programme, in terms of 2014-2020, East Renfrewshire Council have received £1.2 million for the delivery of employability activity via ESF and 266 for business growth grants, as well as part of the Business Gateway Services via the European Regional Development Fund. So the new programme, UK Shared Prosperity Fund, supports the UK Government's wider commitment to level up all parts of the UK, delivering on each of the levelling up objectives and the 3 main thematic programmes and interventions, which are Communities in Place, which looks at neighbourhoods and town centres in terms of capital and revenue investment. Then we have Supporting Local Businesses, which will ultimately mirror the old ERDF programme in terms of support to local businesses via grants and loans, as well as a wide range of other interventions such as innovation and looking at social enterprises as well. And then we have the final intervention, which is People and Skills, which would then mirror the traditional European Social Fund in terms of employability activity. And that's all about boosting core skills to support adults to progress into work using the strategic skills pipeline model, which is a 5-stage employability framework for helping people or adults into vocational training as well as into sustainable employment as well. Now, also part of the People and Skills intervention is the Multiply programme, which focuses on maths in terms of supporting those who are 16 plus increase their skills and knowledge around the maths in terms of increasing skills and qualifications around that area. Now, in terms of the funding allocation for the programme period up to 2025, if we look at the point 10 under funding allocations, we have been allocated 2.72 million, but minus 4% for compliance and audit purposes, then gives us a pot of £2.6 million to deliver activity over the 3 interventions over the 3 years. So in terms of the ask of the paper, it is asking Cabinet, recommends to Cabinet that the UK Government is keen that the Scotland pursues a regional approach to the delivery of this programme, and that the regional investment plan is being developed by the 8 member authorities within the Glasgow City region, and it then asks Cabinet to delegate to the Director of Environment to develop an East Wren Council investment plan which will meet the fund's objectives and will form part of the Glasgow City region investment plan.
Thank you very much, Michael. Can I open to members for questions? Michael, thanks very much for this report. Again, you know, this administration really welcomes these additional funds. They will be well utilised, I'm sure. I would please, I know the timeframes are pretty tight, but please engage with members and other stakeholders as much as possible. But, you know, we are very supportive of your skills and ability to come up with a very compelling investment plan for this, but please keep us in the loop as to what's going on. And when will we get an update on this?
Yeah, so currently our team, along with the internal and external stakeholders, have a project pipeline. We've asked for a call for proposals. We are currently going through those proposals, looking at viability, feasibility, eligibility as well. We will have a final position hopefully by Monday, and we will then come back to Cabinet next meeting outlining our proposals along with costing and outputs and results for each of those projects, covering each of those interventions.
So perfect. So for next Cabinet, we will see the detail of that.
Yeah.
That's excellent. Councillor Devlin.
Were we actually late applying for this funding?
No. So
No.
my experience of these programmes,
Right.
both including UK Government, Scottish Government and EU programme, they will have a definitive start date. So it should have been the 1st of April 2022, just given the various delays at national level, and one, confirming the amounts of money, and then going through the sort of admin process. Glasgow City region are probably in line with all other local authorities in the UK in terms of where they are for developing the plans.
Just to pick up on the point you said about the next Cabinet, due to the timescales of Cabinet, we won't make the next Cabinet, because if people are reporting back on Monday, the blue paper, white paper cycle won't permit the next Cabinet. It'll probably be the Cabinet after that.
Thanks for that. So, can we agree the recommendations in the paper as stated? Thank you very much. So, we now move back to Louise and the Business Operations and Partnerships report for 21-22. Thank you, Louise.
Thanks, Leader. So this report brings forward the end-year performance for the Business Operations and Partnerships Department, as you said, for the financial year 21-22. The department changed its name from Corporate and Community Services on the 31st of January 22, following the retirement of our former Director and Deputy Chief Executive, Caroline Innes. We have around 300 employees covering a range of frontline, strategic and support services and a cross-council enabling function as well. Our priorities are around efficient, effective business operations, council-wide digital transformation and effective community partnerships and strategy development. The last year has seen the department, like many, continue to balance increased workload as a result of the pandemic, the impact of new ICT systems that have affected our key processes for dealing with not only every household in East Renfrewshire, but also every member of staff within the council, and the day-to-day demands of a diverse range of services as well. Our department's had a leading role in the COVID response and recovery over the last couple of years, and that continues to date, including chairing the Crisis Resilience Management Team, leading the Council's humanitarian response and payment of hardship and business support grants, and also supporting and guiding our workforce and managers through the pandemic and communicating with local residents at the same time. I'm proud of what our teams have managed to do this year, proud of the delivery and the commitment of all the teams, and would like to thank them for all their hard work over the year. I think the attached report does give an overview of the range of initiatives and performance outcomes delivered within what have been difficult circumstances. Going forward, our priorities will be to continue to balance these increased demands, especially related to cost of living crisis, with challenging budget targets while progressing further digital transformation, new ways of working, and reviewing with yourselves the Council's strategic priorities for our 10-year vision for the future, engaging with local partners and communities in that journey, and also supporting the wellbeing of our workforce. My team and I would welcome any queries you have on the report. I have some of our colleagues here today, and Cabinet is asked to scrutinise and comment on the end-year performance report for 21-22. Thanks.
Thanks very much, Louise. Any comments from members?
On paragraph 9 on page 66, it mentions staff absences due to mainly stress and musculoskeletal and problems and fractures. What is being done to support staff returning to work, especially in relation to stress and mental health support?
I'll maybe start that and then ask Sharon to come in if she has anything additional she wants to add. Thanks. Our absence has been pretty consistent over the last few years. COVID year was the exception where it was unusually low. Stress and its non-work related stress is coded as is top in the department as across the council. There will be a range of factors at work here, including cost of living, the impact of the pandemic. We also think there's a factor around the age profile of our workforce, split between, a lot of the age demographic means that people are split with caring responsibilities for young families, as well as perhaps ageing parents and bereavements, etc. That can cause its challenges as well. I'd say our staff have been through a lot in recent years, and juggling these increased demands with the personal and professional challenges of the pandemic and changes to the systems and the very fundamental ways that they work and all the processes that they work in. The cost of living crisis is also a concern for us with our staff, and we are trying to support our own staff by providing money, advice and rights supports and guiding them to the same agencies and support that our residents have. Staff wellbeing is a key focus for us. We did do, as a council, a wellbeing survey at the end of last year, and we developed action plans on the back of that as part of a wellbeing strategy. We monitor absence really closely, and in terms of supports for our employees, we have employee counselling, occupational therapy, flexible working policies, phased returns to work, and also the money advice and benefits, employee benefit schemes that I mentioned. So it gives you a flavour. Sharon, is there anything else you'd want to highlight?
You've covered a lot there, Louise, so thank you for doing that. I would say there's quite a number of training approaches as well, so we do try to raise awareness with managers and other employees about spotting the early signs of stress in the workplace, because early intervention is key and it's more successful in reducing absences. So we do that. There's both e-learning and face-to-face training courses provided with regards to this, and we've also been working a lot with HSCP and SAMH in particular, who have been providing quite a lot of courses for us. So we're taking it very seriously. Louise mentioned the benefits scheme. There has been good uptake, and there was a session yesterday where they're trying to do open day events to actually start promoting and raising awareness about the services they provide for financial support for employees, because there is a lot of evidence to suggest, that confirms that finance issues do relate to absence as well. So there is a number of things there, and Louise, I think, covered a lot of it very effectively. So thanks, Louise.
Thank you very much for that thorough response, and I appreciate all that we are doing as a council to support our staff.
Any other comments from members?
I'd just like to ask about, you mentioned I think it was about 300 staff, and is it still the most common hybrid working, our staff returning to work yet, or working from home?
Yeah, like the rest of our workforce, we have a balance of that. So a lot of our office staff now are working in a hybrid way. So you would see them in the office usually kind of about 3 days a week, something like that. Ranges between services, but yeah, more staff available in our buildings. We have had a number of staff who've been present in buildings throughout the whole pandemic because of the nature of their work. So Murray's staff down at the depot in terms of community safety and telecare provision, and the wardens, they've been out at work throughout the pandemic. and supporting our staff. We are still, through Jamie's youth team, the community learning and development team, some of that has been slower to recover in terms of being out and about and working with groups, but now we are starting to see that come back as well. So yeah, a range and a mix across our different services.
I think it'll be interesting to see how that progresses, especially with the cost of living crisis over winter, and staff might actually find they'd rather work out in the office because they'll save money effectively by not working from home. It'll be interesting to see if there's a trend.
Happy to look at that, and I think we're just constantly monitoring what will be happening with our staff and looking at the accommodation that we have and looking at the ways that all of our services right across the council will work in the future. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Anderson. Any other? Councillor Devlin.
Is there a corporate approach to try and get most of the staff back into the offices?
Maybe ask Sharon to come in and say a bit more about this again.
I don't mean just in your department, I mean the council-wise.
Yeah, we have a programme called The Way We Work, which has 3 different work streams around it, looking at technology, looking at our people, and the way that we operate our business. So that has been very much about providing managerial guidance to try and the technology to get our staff back into new ways of working and encourage this hybrid form of working as well, where it suits the needs of our services. I think we still provide face-to-face services for our customers, and again, Sharon may wish to comment. We still provide face-to-face services because we know that some of our customers are particularly vulnerable and would prefer to deal with us in that way. There are efficiencies for the council in terms of driving as much as we can onto the phones and onto particularly online services and trying to make our online services as easy to operate as possible, and that's worked well for us. Sharon might want to comment about registrations and some of the national changes there.
Yeah, I don't think Councillor Devlin had his mic on, so I didn't hear the question.
It's about, Sharon, it's about the provision face-to-face for customers and councils across the country, reducing their face-to-face provision for customers and where we are on that journey. Didn't mention registration specifically, but just customers in general.
So thanks for that, Louise. So for the provision, so we moved through the COVID pandemic. We used to have 10% of our provision was online, and now it's moved to 34%. But we still continue to provide, although we have shut effectively the customer service centre at Giffnock, we still provide service to vulnerable residents that turn up there. So we do still provide services to about 200 customers who attend. So we don't turn anybody away. We do try to encourage people to log online who can, but we appreciate there's a number of customers who are unable to do that, and we continue to support them where required. With registration, it's maybe worth mentioning that the NRS, the National Registrar Scotland, are pushing still to move to continue to provide death registrations for remote, but also offer face-to-face as well, and that will change as of the 24th of September. And they are now pushing as well for birth registrations to be able to be offered remote, and we don't have guidance on that yet, but we're working through that. So there is demand from customers for online services. There is, like, our demographics do vary, and we need to provide for both. So that's what we're trying to work to do at this point in time.
So, I mean, I understand there's a demand for online services, but will we ever get back to normal pre-COVID when you walked into a council and you had an option, to speak to somebody face-to-face?
Well, Barhead is open, so Barhead Service Centre is still open and continues to do that. And at Giffnock, although we shut, so that was a budget saving that was taken, so although the service centre shut in Giffnock, we do still have reception cover, and we still have customer service officers there who are manning the phones and email, and if there's vulnerable customers that come in, we do serve them.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Devlin, and thank you, Sharon. I think to sum up, I think we have to commend Louise and the Business Operations and Partnership team for the resilience they showed in managing through the COVID pandemic. I think if you haven't been doing that work yourself, I don't think you can really understand all the changes in work practices and the determination on those individuals to provide services. So we thank you for that. We also note the recruitment and resource issues, pressures that the department continue to face in continuing to deliver high standards to our customers. So if we're happy with the recommendations in the paper, and can we agree those? Thank you very much. So moving on to item 11, the East Renfrewshire Culture and Leisure Year-End Report. Sorry? So if I can ask Siobhan McColgan to talk to that report. I do note that this report, and particularly the appendices, has already been discussed at the Trust meeting itself. So this is really for Cabinet now. Thank you.
Thank you, Leader. The purpose of the report is to inform Cabinet of the performance of the Trust at end year 21-22. It provides a high-level summary based on the performance indicators and activities in the Outcome Delivery Plan and East Renfrewshire Culture and Leisure's Business Plan. Appendix A provides a summary of the Trust performance with regards to arts, sports, libraries and community facilities. During the last year, the Trust continued to play a significant role in response to COVID-19, as well as recommencing sports and leisure services in line with the government route map. This included a focus in areas such as recovery of gym memberships, re-establishing swimming programmes, return of theatre programmes and increasing library use through click and collect services, digital access. Achievements are noted within paragraph 10 with additional details included in the balanced scorecard, and this includes examples such as recovery of leisure centre attendances to 50% of pre-COVID levels and gym memberships to 78% of 1920 attendance levels. Eastwood Park's Theatre Professional Performing Arts programme saw attendances recover to over 73% of 1920s levels. Duff Memorial Hall and Busby Library were refurbished and Mearns Library received a replacement heating system, and the East Renfrewshire Culture, Leisure, Sports Leadership Academy supported 22 young people from a number of our high schools to develop leadership skills through volunteering, and it resulted in 9 of them gaining employment as sports coaches. The areas for further improvement continue to focus on recovery and customer experience, such as continuing to increase attendance levels and continuing to improve and work on booking and payment systems. COVID-19 continued to impact on the operating income for 21-22. However, the income of £2,910,000 is a significant increase from 2021, where it was £950,000. Through continued careful planning and management, the Trust has offset the loss of income, resulting in a net surplus position of £685,000. So in summary, the scorecard shows that the Trust has responded well to the challenges that have arisen during the COVID-19 pandemic. It's continued to strive towards improving customer experiences, meeting its charitable objectives, and is contributing to the health and well-being of the residents in East Renfrewshire. The Cabinet is asked to comment on this report as a summary of the Trust's end-year performance for 21-22.
Thank you very much. Councillor Pragnell, is there anything you would like to add?
I would just like to say that it's been a very challenging couple of years for the Leisure Trust, and that we've coped remarkably well, given that we had to go through 2 lockdowns, and also the fact that leisure facilities were probably the last to open up. So I think we are getting back to normal, is what normal really is, and there's still work done to encourage people back into the leisure centres, especially older people, and those back into libraries, but there is progress being made, and as convener I'm confident this will continue over the next couple of months.
Thank you, Councillor Pragnell. Any other comments from members? I would just like to echo Councillor Pragnell's comments there. I think it's probably surprised most of us to see the recovery in attendances at many of our venues. It's probably been faster than we were expecting, which is great to see. But as Councillor Pragno identified and is reflected in the report, we're still seeing some reluctance from our older residents to return, and we need to acknowledge that and try to do as much as we can to increase those numbers. I'd also like to note the important work that the Trust did in providing mass vaccination centres in the Carmichael Hall and the Foundry. That has been a huge service to the community in keeping our community safe, so we thank the Trust for their support in those efforts. So unless there's any other comments, can we agree the recommendations in the report? Agreed. Thank you. Moving on to item 12, I'm not going to read out the total agenda item because it's quite wordy. So if I can pass this on. Oh, it's Gillian picking up. Thank you, Gillian.
Yeah, thanks. This is a report seeking consent to reduce the speed on the Glasgow Southern Orbital Road between the roundabout or over the M77 and towards the new left-in, left-out lane, which is related to the Maidenhill Master Plan site, which was released several years ago. So Maidenhill is probably about 60% built out, so that has created obviously additional traffic going onto the GSO from the site towards the M77, and our roads department has been keeping an eye on that, and they now consider that it's appropriate to reduce the speed around the junction from 70 miles an hour down to 40 or 50 miles an hour, and that the difference is shown on the plan, which is on page, I think it's 115. So we're just seeking consent for that on safety, road safety grounds.
Thanks very much, Gillian. It wasn't actually that easy to hear you in terms of the volume, but I think we've all read the paper. Do we have any questions from members? Councillor Anderson? No. So if we've got no other comments, can I ask members to agree the recommendations in this report? Agreed. Thank you very much. So I don't know if it's Gillian again next on item 14, which again I'm not going to read the item agenda because it's far too wordy.
Okay. So we have new national guidance, mainly for the process of, for example, house builders or other developers who are seeking a road construction consent from the council. So this also reflects the new hierarchy that has come in from the Scottish Government, where pedestrians and cyclists have the highest hierarchy, and then after that comes vehicular vehicles. So essentially, just seeking for approval to adopt the national guidelines and also to adopt the council's own good practice, which should basically make the planning application process and the road construction process for developments easier to go through, as there is a much clearer guidance on what developers should be doing for consistency across the board. Thank you.
Thank you, Gillian. Any questions from members? One question from Councillor Anderson.
I would think because your microphone's stuck on.
It is stuck, yeah.
Mine won't come on. I'm conscious then that the people attending virtually might not be able to hear me.
Can you press that again, Councillor Anderson? I think it might just be the lights. But...
Yeah, mine isn't going off.
Happy to speak with the councillor after the meeting, if that would be helpful. I'm not really hearing very much.
Try pressing it once again, because she's saying the camera did get to you.
They'll go in red.
Oh, no, there it is. There now.
You're there now, so she should hear you.
I'm trying to remember. After that. You mentioned, well, there's a couple of things actually, just observations. Well, the first one is about well, this being guidance for the future construction, but in terms of Ayr Road, and you're talking about cycle lanes. I have had people, I know it's contentious.
Sorry, the guidelines that I'm talking about, the local ones, are essentially about new developments, so, you know, housing releases. You know,
right, okay, so it's not about existing cycle lanes.
It's not necessarily about development on the existing road, but obviously, as I said in the national guidelines, the hierarchy has changed from cars having, you know, the most space on the road to more of a mix. So the idea from the Scottish Government and the UK Government is that it should be pedestrians, cyclists and then vehicles as the hierarchy. So that is obviously going to play out over the coming years as we are required to roll out infrastructure to assist that hierarchy.
Okay, well, it was the first point was really about the bollards that were there and taken away, and now so the residents complaining about those going in, but then when they came out, the cyclists are now complaining that people are parking in the lanes, and it was a very specific email I got from someone as a parent as well who's cycling with their children, and they had to go out into the road 14 times because of the number of cars. That I'm not sure what you can do, but this is a council. That it's obviously a concern for both residents and cyclists, and I realise it's difficult to actually keep everybody happy.
All we can do is continue to consult on, you know, projects. I totally understand the Ayr Road was a temporary kind of experimental solution, so I think it's fair to say that the bollards were not particularly good. They didn't have a lot of quality, and they caused a bit of an issue. There are other ways that we can segregate, because obviously to encourage people to cycle, you have to feel safe, and it's quite difficult if you're on a bike and you have Arctics and buses and cars roaring by you. You don't feel particularly safe. So segregation is probably what we need to do. What type of segregation, I don't really have any details just now, because it's something we're going to have to look at now and for the future. So I don't think there's any easy answer to this at all.
No, I think you're right, absolutely, I appreciate that. And it's just, well, how we can communicate to our residents on the actual road. If they park in the cycle lane, it's going to cause an issue.
Yeah, what I would say, when we did the consultation on Ayr Road, I saw lots of people saying things like there was no consultation. Every single household on Ayr Road at that time received a letter, a pamphlet of details, as well as wider consultation that we did across the area and on Commonplace, the Commonplace platform. So there was consultation, as I say, some people wanted it, some people didn't, so there's no easy answer. We just need to work through for the future and try and find something that's more appropriate.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, the second thing, is at the end of the back of the paper as well, it mentioned about all the participants, and I noticed there was quite a lot of representation from a lot of the councils, but there was no, I didn't see anyone there from East Renfrewshire. Was that?
Sorry, what are you referring to in the report?
It mentions a list of all the different people who worked on it, and I just wondered. I don't have. I'm trying to load it on my laptop here, but it's trying to. I did have a paper copy, but I've not got it with me.
Well, we definitely contributed to the national guidance.
Yeah, it's just we're not credited with it. I don't think.
Okay, well, I can take that back and find out why not.
Good. Okay. All right. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Councillor Anderson, and thank you, Gillian. Are there any other questions? There is one. Okay, over to Councillor Pragnell.
I'm sorry, I can't hear at all. I'm not getting any signal.
It's not letting me go off.
Right, it's back to me, back to you, Owen.
Right, could you press yours again?
There you go.
Can you hear me now?
No, not really. I can see your mouth moving, but I can't hear you, I'm afraid. Again, happy to take it offline, Councillor.
Can you hear me, Gillian?
I can hear you better, yes.
Sorry about that. Can you hear me now? I know. It was just on page 353. It mentions winter maintenance and how the fact that if gritting and ploughing can't get into cul-de-sacs on health and safety grounds, what would be in place instead? Would there be more grit bins if it was too dangerous for ploughing and gritting in those areas?
Yeah. Cul-de-sacs are very difficult for gritters to, especially in the modern age where people have more than one car. They're usually used as an additional car parking area where actually they're turning areas. So they can be very difficult, and gritters have to minimise reversing as much as possible because they are so big. So if we know that there are issues with particular cul-de-sacs, then we will have a grit bit somewhere close to that. And in fact, we have a map on the council's website that shows you the location of every single grit bin within East Renfrewshire. And obviously, if there are any particular issues, then I would suggest that anybody would contact the road service with their concerns, and we would have a look at it.
Thank you. And also, on page 390, it mentions electric vehicle charging points, and it says the ERC Climate Change Strategy and Action Plan would outline how we achieve net zero by 2045, and that was due for publication in 2021. Has that been published? Because obviously this is a draft. On this document it says draft, but has that plan been published?
I'm not responsible for that, so it's possibly Bill Dawes may be able to answer that rather than myself.
Yeah, that's fine. Bill, are you happy to answer that?
Nice hand over there.
Yeah, and the Get to Zero action plan, we need to do a strategic environmental assessment. That is just being completed. We then need to go out to public consultation on the draft Get to Zero action plan. We are looking at the timing of the public consultation about the Get to Zero action plan, because we're also conscious that we need to do public consultation in relation to the budget. We obviously don't wish to be asking people the same different questions at the same time in case the matter gets confused. So we need to align the Get to Zero action plan consultation with the budget consultation. Once we've done that, we'll timeline the consultation plan to Get to Zero action plan, and we'll then bring the results of that back to Cabinet. We had initially hoped that would be the end of this year, but given the difficulties of aligning the two, it might be the beginning of next calendar year.
Okay, thank you. And I take it the publication was delayed due to the pandemic.
That's correct.
Yes. Okay, thank you.
No more questions? So can we agree the recommendation in item 14? So we're agreed. So I think that's it. I don't think we've got any other business. So with that, we'll call the meeting to a close. Thank you very much for everyone attending today. Thank you. Bye-bye.